Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mast. Welcome back to another episode of Patch Notes. We just had a big patch hit that's going to be coming out about a week from now, and there's a lot of changes in it, both to Ranked, to Conquest, to items, and to God Balance. So looking forward to it. It's definitely the type of patch that I care about, and we'll kind of talk about some interesting stuff that Hi-Rez decided to do. So first thing, let's go ahead and start with Ranked. Matchmaking rating, aka MMR, or otherwise known as ELO, is returning, and that's already something that has hiddenly existed or secretly existed but hasn't shown up. And now you will actually be able to see your MMR or your ELO essentially when you're looking at yourself on the ranked menu. Now it won't show up for other players unless they are in Masters or Grandmasters. Sorry, I misspoke a little bit there. It will not show up to other players unless you are in Masters or Grandmasters, in which case they will be able to see your MMR at that rank. So basically the top level players will have visible MMR to the people that, just may not be at that rank or are at that rank. But otherwise, yours is going to be just kind of for you, just so you know where you're at, and you'll use that to get better. I think the goal is, people don't really care about seeing each other's MMR too much, so I think that makes sense where it's like the top level players, you get to see where they're at, kind of a goal to set. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking at your own. So another thing that got added in is duo queue for Ranked Conquest, which got taken out, I want to say season 4? It's been a while. So duo queue coming back, but there are some heavier restrictions. Before, you could queue with someone that was approximately within 400 MMR of you, or I want to say basically a division. I think each division's around 400 MMR. Now, if you're Plat 1 or below, you can queue within someone who's 200 MMR of you. So if you're like 2,500 and they're 2,300, that works. Or 2,500 and they're 2,700, that works. I don't know what the actual MMRs are going to be. That might be the wrong number, but essentially, within that number. But players Diamond and above, players can only queue within 50. So basically, if you are a high-level ranked player where it starts to matter a lot more, you're going to have much closer matchmaking. Because a lot of time, even at the very top levels, what we'd see is Masters, Grandmasters ranked, we'd see two pros in comms together, two guys that are probably on a team together, and that could give them a potentially huge advantage than over the other teams. And now it's going to be a little less of an advantage because they're at least going to be closer together in MMR, which means the game itself should be a much higher level game. So for example, you're not going to get the duo lane of rival unless you're players that are around the level of the duo lane of rival, right? So duo queue is a little less exploitable just because you need to actually be close to that rank and they need to be close to each other in order to play together and to play against you. So I think it's a good change. I think it'll be a little tricky. I think a lot of people are going to get upset because there's going to be less potential to play with your friends because your friends actually need to be close to you. But if they are, it'll be fun and that'll be great. So I think it's a good change. We'll see how it works out. I don't think it'll be too broken. It'll probably still be a little bit of an advantage, but that's kind of natural, right? Moving on from that, qualification games are being removed. You no longer have to qualify with 10 games, which I think is a good change. Instead, you're going to start at a rank between Bronze 3 and Gold 1, depending on your MMR. From what they were saying during the patch notes, it seemed like if you're around Diamond, you're pretty much automatically going to start at Gold 1, because it's basically a soft reset. So it's going to keep in mind whatever you did last split, and it'll put you at some rank to begin with for that split. So if you didn't do anything, you're going to start at Bronze 3. If you were somewhere in Bronze, you're probably going to start at Bronze 3. If you're somewhere between Silver, Gold, and Plat, you'll be somewhere in the middle. And if you're Diamond, you'll be starting in Gold 1 is at least what it's supposed to do. We'll see with that. Let's see. I think we can go ahead and move on from that. With role queue, they did make a small change so that players that are the top role in a ranked game are going to get their primary role. Or sorry, the top rank in a ranked game are going to get their primary role. Before it was just balanced, you could kind of go either way. They're going to make sure that in ranked, not in other modes, but in ranked, first pick's going to get their primary role. I think it's a good change. I think honestly they should probably do that for other modes, but it's more important in ranked. It's definitely important that ranked gets that. So we'll look forward to that as well. All right, custom games, this isn't a big deal for most of us, but it will matter in SPL and it will matter in some other type of stuff, where free pawns has been added. Basically, free pawns can be used during combat, which pawns used to be able to do a couple seasons ago, and it's for spots where you're in an actual emergency and you need to end and you need to pause the game right now. That'll be an option, which is great. New assault map, I'm actually not going to go into this. If you guys want to check it out, I will link to the VOD on the description or in the description and probably in the comments as well. I don't care about Assault at all. Most of you guys watching probably don't watch me for Assault, believe it or not. So I'm not going to go into this. You guys can check it out if you want. I don't play the mode. I'm not going to talk about it. Conquest changes. These are pretty big. Primal Fury is getting a buff, so increased damage dealt to jungle camps from 5% to 7% after killing the Primal Fury. Remember, this thing stacks, so it used to be up to 3 times, which means up to 15%. It's still up to 3 times, but now it's up to 21% in terms of damage dealt to jungle camps, and that does include jungle bosses. I still don't think this is a super important objective. I still think that it's definitely worse than the Oni Gold Fury, but I think it's a little bit better, I guess. I think, honestly, for this to be really impactful, it needs to be around 10%. Obviously, it's better, but I still don't think it's something that's super worth getting for the effect alone. I think it's almost entirely worth getting for the Gold Fury. So I'm still not a huge fan. Spirit Minions. This is a big deal for the duo lane. I kind of like it, I kind of don't, and we'll kind of go into why. With the duo lane right now, we're in a spot where to get level 2, the duo lane needs to kill 2 waves and grab 2 smalls off of a buff. Or grab an entire buff, but you need to at least get 2 waves and 2 smalls off of a buff, which is a lot. So they are adding Spirit Minions, which have practically no HP. They're 50 HP, they offer 34 XP, and they have 5 physical power. So basically they do almost no damage, they die super, super fast, and they exist to give you level 2 without needing to clear the sides. Should this actually be a thing in the game? I don't think so. I think this is an absolute trying to fix the problem without really having it make any sense. I don't think it's the right way to go. In my opinion, I think they should really be targeting the fact that splitting is a little too weak right now, because in the past splitting was at 75% shared, and now it's at 60% shared, and I think it should be at 65% shared. But either way, this is the change they made. So the idea is dual lane will now automatically be getting level 2 off of those 2 waves. I think it's good to have that, but that still means that dual lane is still going to be behind in farm in general, and it still has that problem. I still think dual lane is going to be too behind in farm. It's just less snowbally now, is essentially what's happening. Oh, I hate these. I hate these so much. This is probably my least favorite change I have seen in Smite maybe ever. We have new jungle rules, so that when killing a jungle camp on the opposite side of the map, you now gain less experience and gold. I hate this so much. I hate it so much. It decreases over time. So what this means is that you get essentially more XP over time from invading, but in the early game, you're getting a decrease of 33% at 0 minutes, and eventually it becomes 0% at 15 minutes. So you're getting punished for dominating your opponent and invading camps. I really dislike this. I think it's pretty obvious why. Essentially what they're doing is they are reducing counterplay. Jungle is going to become, at least in the early game where you're actually farming, it's going to become a lot more based on taking your own camps and then ganking, which is kind of dull and defeats the point of jungle. I think jungle is interesting when you're in a spot where you can spend almost all game in the jungle pressuring things. When you're constantly, it's just like, oh, blue buff came up, all right, gank off of blue, all right, this camp came up, gank after that. It becomes repetitive, and that's a lot of what Smite's been in the past, where it's like, all right, this buff timer is up, the jungler needs to go to this buff timer so that they get their farm. That's all the farm they get for the next 30 seconds, they should probably gank, and then they should go do this next buff that spawns in the next 30 seconds, is kind of what it would be before. And when you have invades that are valuable because they're worth just as much, you get less of that. There's a lot more ability to rotate to different things. But when you punish the jungler for invading, so not only are they running to the other side of the map, not only are they putting themselves out of position and risking that the enemy team can rotate and catch them, but they also get less farm, is really, really punishing for something that's already meant to be punishing. And I really dislike that. So I'm going to leave that at that. I think it makes plenty of sense. Hopefully you guys agree with me. I really dislike this change. I hope they will rethink it. Basically, they feel like it's too snowbally, too much pressure to be able to take camps away in the early game. I completely disagree. And I don't think that should be a thing. Visual feedback on objective kills. This is just kind of a little thing to make it more obvious when objectives go down. Item changes. These are actually pretty big, and we'll see what happens with them. Aussie is getting a slight rework. It's fairly decent rework. It's still similar to Aussie before, though. So it is now 2550 gold. I believe before it was 1850 gold. And now it's 20 physical power, 20% lifesteal, 25% attack speed, 15 penetration, and the passive is if you drop below 35% health, you gain an additional 30% lifesteal for 5 seconds and can only occur once every 15 seconds. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe the stats before for Aussie were essentially along the lines of no power, 15% lifesteal, 20 or 25% attack speed, 15 pen, and I believe the passive had 5% less lifesteal. I could be wrong. So they're buffing the stats. It's 700 more gold. I think essentially they're just trying to make this a stronger item. And during the patch notes, they talked about this being more of a better fill item, where there were other items like Toxic Blade and Executioner and Kin Size that all kind of have their own thing. And they feel like Aussie is a good balance item to kind of get somewhere in the middle that's less focused on a specific thing. So I'm okay with this. I don't really care. I don't think it's going to be OP, but that's kind of a big change for Aussie, which normally, at least in competitive play, didn't really get picked up much before. Ikkeval, I'm not so sure about. So Ikkeval is getting changed, so it's 2,450 gold, gives you 30 power, gives you 30% attack speed, and after every successful basic attack, you increase your physical power by 15 and reduce enemy attack speed by 10%, up to 3 stacks. Now keep in mind, Ikkeval often gets slept on because people think about needing to attack the enemy god for that passive to build them power. Keep in mind, you can hit minions to gain that power, so you can be clearing your wave. You got 30 power, you got 30% attack speed, life is good, life is good. And then you hit 3 minions, or you hit a minion 3 times. Okay, pretty normal stuff when you're ADC and clearing lane. You now have 75 power and 30% attack speed, and life is very good. So with that 75 power and 30% attack speed, you decide you're going to shred the other ADC's face. And while you're shredding their face, you're also taking away their own attack speed. So it's almost like you're giving yourself another 30% by reducing theirs by 30%, if that makes any sense. So in terms of actually dueling, consider Ikkeval as being 75 power and 60% attack speed. It's pretty broken, right? Yeah, it's pretty broken. So Ikkeval is in an absolutely nut spot as far as dueling in lane. It's going to be really ridiculous. I could be wrong and be overestimating it, but I think this item is absolutely going to be receiving nerfs. I think that the concept of the change is good. I think Ikkeval being so cheap is kind of stupid. ADCs normally don't want cheap items because they're building in a late game. It's kind of silly to have a cheap item in the late game because then you want to sell it, and you're an ADC, so you don't want to sell an item because you want to be in the late game and doing all the damage you can. So 2,450 gold, stronger item, makes sense. I think it's absolutely overtuned. I think it's going to be insane. I think it's going to get nerfed pretty hard. But I like the idea, Hi-Rez. I like the idea. I don't play ADC, so I don't care that much. Wukong, God Balance. Decrease the attack damage on Dragon's Call from 35 to 95 to 30 to 90. Essentially, Wukong was just capable of a little too much damage when he's attacking with his 2 versus just throwing it. This is a pretty small tune down. I think, honestly, they should have tuned it another 5 per rank. Maybe not in the early game. Probably not in the early game, but at least at the max rank, I think 90 is still way too much. He has 6 dragons. That's 540 damage, plus a whole lot of magical power scaling. It's nuts. But nonetheless, I still think this is the right idea. Bacchus, they gave him a huge buff in the beginning of Season 6, and people are realizing how OP he is with that buff. So Drunkometer is getting a nerf. That passive is completely broken. I think it's a good nerf. I think he'll still be in a good spot. What they're doing is they're decreasing the damage mitigation from 7% to 5% while he's tipsy, and from 14% to 10% while he's smashed. Essentially, Bacchus, when he's at 35%, I believe, and above, he gets smashed, which is what you're normally at. 14% damage mitigation for practically free is a little broken. So they're making it 10%. I still think it's kind of broken. But I don't think that I think he'll be in a much better spot now. Taking off 4% damage mitigation is pretty big. And they're also taking off 5 damage per rank of his belt. So it's going to be 20 damage essentially for the entire 3. Bakasura is getting big nerfs. Baka has been very, very strong for quite a while. He's been standing out a lot, especially in ranked. And so what they're doing is they are now decreasing the duration of his cone autos from 6 seconds to 5 seconds. Keep in mind, Baka usually has a lot of attack speed, so a lot of the time that's actually going to mean 2 whole auto attacks that he's losing off his ult. That's a big deal. And decreasing CC immunity duration from 1.5 to 1 seconds. If you guys have seen me play Baka, I am sure you have seen me say, I'm using my ult for beads or something along those lines. I'm going to use it for a cleanse, preemptively try and avoid CC. That's a big deal. Taking off half a second of trying to avoid CC is a big deal, so pretty hard nerf to Baka ult. I think it makes sense, but there might be other ways. But I don't know. Overall, I think it's a good change. I think he probably needed it. We'll see how much it affects him. He should still be fine, but I think this will be a surprisingly hard nerf. Fenrir. The things I have to say. I want to say I have 2 or 3 stars on Fenrir. I'm not sure which. I've played him a lot. He's one of my favorite gods in the game. Whenever I've really been asked about Fenrir, I normally say that he basically sucks because his 3 is incredibly unreliable. When he was first released, Fenrir was an incredible god, and as time has gone on, more gods have gotten CC and more gods have gotten mobility, and so Fenrir has continued to get nerfed, at least in terms of his 3, which is why they've had to buff him in other ways over time, like buffing his ultimate and buffing his 2. And so this patch, what they're doing is they're trying to take some of the assassins that are being played as support, take them out of the support role a little bit more. So what they're doing to Fenrir is something that theoretically will make him a better jungler. I somewhat disagree as someone that's played him a lot and that prefers him in jungle, just because I like him more. I think it's more fun than playing him support. I don't really think this is the great change. So let's talk about it. Unchained decreased base damage from 95 to 335 to 75 to 315. This is a really big nerf at early levels. Keep in mind, this is a 20 damage nerf early game. That's huge. This is basically 20% of the damage they're taking off. And they are decreasing the amount of cooldown decrease on successful hit from his 1 by 50% to 30%. So essentially, when you hit his 1, you would get the cooldown halved. Now you're only getting it reduced by 30%. That is a big deal for Fenrir, and I am not a big fan. So one of the things that was interesting about Fenrir, when you were actually playing him somewhat like an assassin, is you could jump in, you could ult somebody, you could pull them to your team, and you would pretty much be getting your jump back up, assuming you're building full cooldown as an assassin, building like boots, Jotuns, other cooldown items. Back when he was actually viable, there were other cooldown items you would probably buy. But when you're going full cooldown like that, you can get that one up really, really quick, and they're reducing that. Before that made him more viable as a squishy character, where it's like, yeah, you're running in and doing this risky thing, but you have a jump back up so you can get out, almost like Cirquet to some degree. And now they're reducing that. So he's less viable in that way. He's actually less safe. So ironically, by trying to make him less of a tank, they're also making him more vulnerable as an assassin, which he's already vulnerable as an assassin. The other change they're making to try and make up for the nerf to his 1 is Brutalize will now always cleave, and the cleave damage will be 50% of the normal damage on Brutalize. So if he hits a target with Brutalize, which does 640 base damage at max rank, and someone's right next to that target, they'll take 320 over the course of Brutalize. And at max runes, this ability will deal an additional 15% of your physical power per hit. Now, Pon was talking about the idea here being now he has a little more value to decide between stunning and going for the max runes on his 3. As someone that's played a lot of Fenrir, I don't think Pon has, because that's not worth. It's still not worth. Brutalize is such a counterable ability. It is so easy to counter because cripple, silence, stun, so many different things can disrupt him. Not to mention dashes to pull him into the enemy team, teleports to get out of it, jumps to get out of it. There's so many ways to avoid Brutalize or cancel Brutalize or punish Brutalize that you don't want to use Brutalize in most situations, which is why Fenrir normally focuses on his 1, maybe his 2, and definitely his ultimate, and it's also why he's mostly seen as support, because it makes sense to just basically be tanky boy, pull person a team with ult, and kill them. And Fenrir is just not worth playing besides that right now. It's just too easy to counter. You get very rare situations where you're against like a Hebo, a Shibalanke, a Pele, just a bunch of people that can't cancel Brutalize and you wreck their face. That's really, really rare. And normally you just get super punished for not being incredibly careful with that ability. It is incredibly rare that you can get off a full Brutalize against anybody taking you seriously, because it's just so easy to counter. Normally you're going to get off 1 to 2 ticks and then maybe put yourself in a bad spot by even doing that much. So I don't like the change. I don't think it's the way to go. I think what they should be focusing on is scaling and giving a way to Brutalize, for Brutalize to be more reliable and actually make him more viable as an assassin. They have to understand that Fenrir plays like a support to some degree right now. He plays like a warrior. What he does is he jumps in, pulls someone to team, and that's his job. He's like an Ares. He's like a Daji. He's like a Sobek. You know, he's one of those characters where he's trying to pull someone out of position, and that's his thing. And so unless he's more viable as a damage dealer by making Brutalize not suck, he's just going to stay there. So he's worse, but I think that's mostly all they did. I will say the good thing for Brutalize is it's now a good jungle clear ability. He'll be able to farm better. I respect that. Besides that, I'm not a fan of this change at all. Sorry for going on a lot about that. I played a lot of Fenrir. I feel like I have a pretty good opinion on it. So I kind of went in depth there. Freya recently got reworked again and is getting nerfed yet again. So Decrease the base damage on her 1 from 11 to 75 to 10 to 60. Pretty big nerf as it scales up. Decrease the slow from 25% to 15%. Decrease the minion explosion damage from 50% to 25%. So really big nerf to her 1. And decrease the range damage magical power scaling of her 2 from 15% to 10%. 5% magical power is a pretty big deal as well. And these are some really decent nerfs to Freya. We'll see how good she is. What I'm expecting to see is that she will hit very, very weak in the early stages of the game and will still be fairly strong late game, but is going to be kind of trash late or early game. So we'll see how that goes for her. I think it'll be maybe okay, but I'm kind of afraid she's going to be so bad early game now from these nerfs. I mean, this is a big deal, man. Taking off 12 at rank 2 is a big deal. And then 18 at rank 3. So that nerf to her 1's a really hard hit. But late game, she'll be similar to what she was before. Hunbots. I don't know how this change is going to go. I love Hunbots. I think a lot of you guys know that. His Sacred Monkey can now re-hit minions, but still only hit gods once. So what this is going to do, he can clear camps better. Nice. He can also accidentally teleport to things that he doesn't want to a little better. So what's going to happen here is Hunbots can now clear camps a lot better with his 3. Like if he's clearing a mid camp, it'll go bounce, bounce, and then before it would just stop, and it'll bounce back twice now. So you'll hit both of those twice. But when you're fighting around waves or jungle camps, which you do fairly often, you can't predict the bounce as well. Because now you have to straight up be like, all right, I got 3 minions. I need to hit the minions and then bounce to the god. Or, all right, I've got a mid camp. I've got to hit the god. Wait, no, I can't even do that. I've got to hit this specific minion so it'll bounce to the other minion and then bounce back to that minion. And then the god will get in range and it'll bounce to the god and then I'll teleport to the god. Because with Hunbots' 3, you teleport to the last thing that you're hitting. So, interesting change. It's good for his clear. It's maybe not so good for the rest of him. It does only hit gods once, by the way. I don't know if I actually brought that up before. It does only hit gods once. So there are going to be times where you will probably accidentally teleport to minions where you didn't expect to, but that's just kind of going to be what it's going to be. Yorm is getting some changes as well. These are nothing big. He needs much more, but it's something in the right direction. So they buffed his base physical protection by from 18 to 21. And then they decreased cooldown from his ultimate, which was 120 to 100 to 100 seconds at all ranks. Yorm relies very heavily on his ultimate. This makes his ultimate more reliable in the early game by having it more often. But he's still kind of bad in general. So I don't know why they only did this much. They need to figure out some stuff. I think they need to make his 1 bigger. I think they need to make the 3 easier to use. I think it's too focused on popping through a cloud. I think it needs some sort of effect where you can breathe in the cloud just from being near it. So like maybe if you have a cloud within the range of your 3 that would knock up, you'll kind of suck that cloud in and therefore you'll be able to deploy clouds when you come out of your 3, essentially. It needs something like that because right now it's just, he's too predictable and not effective enough. So they need to buff his core abilities. His ultimate is actually pretty decent as is. They need to buff his core abilities for him to be better. Arthur got some nerfs, kind of. I don't know why they think this is enough. So what Hi-Rez is doing, they're decreasing the melee bonus damage from 50% to 30, scaling to 50% on overhead slash. That's his blue stance 1. So essentially when you're very close to them, you'll be doing, at rank 1, you'll just be doing 30% bonus damage, but still at rank 5, you'll be doing 50%. This is not that big of a deal. This will, for the most of the game, Arthur is still going to be doing the same amount of damage. Decreased energy gain from 2 to 1.5 per hit on his 3. This is more of a big deal, but still not all that much. So basically this is reducing his energy gain by quite a bit as he gets into the later stages of the game and starts hitting lots of people with his 3. So it's going to reduce his ability to use his ultimate so frequently in fights, but he's still going to be able to use his ult really frequently in fights. It's just a little harder to do so. So I don't know, kind of a decent nerf, but I think there's other problems here. And then also both abilities now cost 40 mana on his ultimate. Oh my God, big deal. So in my opinion, I think Arthur's big ultimate is a little too strong, and I think his energy gain is still probably going to be too good. I guess we'll see. I could be wrong, but I still think Arthur is going to be overtuned. He's definitely going to still be incredible in lane. In lane, he will barely get touched. He will get a slightly weaker early game. He will get a tiny bit less energy gain. The big change here is the fact that he's getting less energy gain in team fights where he can hit like 3 to 4 people with his 3. So that's the big change. Merlin. This is actually a pretty big nerf. So Merlin, Eclipse reduced initial hit scaling from 70% to 60%. That's his 1. Frostbolt no longer applies the Gem of ISO slow first. So basically, if you had Gem of ISO and you used your 1, you would automatically do more damage from Gem of ISO because a Frostbolt does more damage if they're slowed. So it now does it after. So Gem of ISO is not quite as good. They also reduced the bonus damage from 20% to 15%. I don't know if they really needed to do that, but they did. Blizzard fixed several issues that were causing this ability to do much more damage than intended. I don't think that's a surprise. I didn't realize that was a thing, but I don't think it's a surprise. That ability seemed absolutely nuts to a whole lot of people. I remember when I first played Merlin and I touched the ice dance, I was like, oh my God, what is this ability? And so it's not too crazy that it's bugged and doing more than it's supposed to. An increased flicker cooldown from 22 to 18 to 24 to 20. I think this is fine. I don't care that much. I think it's probably a little too low, honestly, for a little mini combat blink. I think it actually does get a little too low in the late game because you so often build Merlin with pretty much full cooldown. So probably a decent change. It's honestly, I don't know how much it's going to matter in the early game, to be honest. When it's 22 to 24, you just rarely use this in the early game. Late game, you'll definitely see a difference. Nausea, again, like what they were doing with Fenrir, they want to nerf Nausea into a spot where Nausea can't be played quite as viably as support. So what they're doing is they're nerfing burst damage. Burst damage, no, base damage on Nausea's ultimate. So now Nausea's ult is going to be going from 40 to 120 per hit to 30 to 110 per hit. So basically 10 damage off at all ranks. In the early game, this is going to be murder to Nausea ult. This is a huge deal. Don't know why they're nerfing it this hard. In the late game, it's honestly not going to matter that much. So, I think they kind of overdid it in the early game. I think the main problem is late game. It does too much base damage, and it's not as reliant on scaling as it should be. Yet again, similar to the Fenrir change where they nerfed his 1 by 20 base damage at rank 1, they can't just take away 10 damage and expect Nausea to be anywhere near as good in the jungle. So I think they overdid it yet again. Keep in mind, Nausea's hitting, what, 3-4 times in that ultimate with this amount? I think it's 3, right? I don't know, man. I can't visualize the ultimate in my head right now. I think it's 3, 4. I think it's 4. Anyways, that aside, it doesn't matter that much. That's a pretty big nerf in the early game. That's actually a really big deal, especially when you're topping this on top of it, right? Because it's going from 80 to 280 to 50 to 270 on the landing damage. So, the initial / landing damage. So that's a really big nerf to Nausea in the early game. Doesn't matter a whole lot in the late game. It's something, but it matters a lot more in the early game because it's basically the same number in the early game. God, on the initial / landing, it's actually more in the early game, which is just stupid. But yeah, big nerfs to Nausea early game, and the target is to be nerfing Nausea support. They mostly just nerf Nausea in general. Universe Ring Toss. Decreased protection debuff from 15 to 10 scaling to 14. I don't really get this one. The idea, again, was that this is making Nausea a little too strong as support, was what they were saying. They also barely nerfed this. Keep in mind, Nausea Ring Toss mostly just kind of blows in the early game because you need to rank it up to get more bounces, plus get more damage. So once you rank it up, it gets pretty nuts. But before that, it's not very good. So when the ability's not very good, it doesn't reduce as many protections. But I think it's fine to reduce that many protections when the ability's not very good. So I'm a little confused on this one. Keep in mind, it goes to 14, which is 1 under 15 at max rank. So I think it's kind of a stupid change, but they did it. I don't know. I'm not really sure what they were thinking on that one. That's so minor. Pele got actual nerfs. I think they're pretty good. Decrease the inner damage from Eruption, which is her 2. Yes, her 2? I think so. From 80 to 260 to 70 to 250. That has to be her 2. I don't know what else it would be. Yeah, inner damage, what am I talking about? 80 to 260 to 70 to 250. Small change, not a huge deal. It will make her a little weaker in the early game. That's really kind of the idea, is just make her 2 a little less impactful when you're at that like level 2, level 3 stage with Pele. I guess it'd be level 3 stage where you can just frag someone like instantly. A little harder to do that. And more importantly, decrease the initial damage on Pele Ultimate from 200 to 520 to 180 to 520. Basically, this is taking off 20 at base rank. It's still the same at max rank. This is making Pele's early game a little bit weaker. But Pele is still Pele. Pele is still strong. Really what they did here is around level 5, you're going to lose 30 damage, and you're still going to be Pele outside of that. So she's still going to be really nuts, but this is a small nerf to her. It'll make her a little weaker because that's so much the important stage for Pele is around that level 5 time where she can do crazy things to you. Ra now gets 0.5 more physical protection per level. Okay, sure, I'll take a 10 protection late game. Rama 2, finally Hi-Rez realized this was dumb as hell. I don't know if this was ever intentional or not. Rama 2 is the most mana-hungry ability in the game that you want to frequently use. So they made it a little cheaper. I honestly think it should probably be even cheaper, but they made it from 80 to 100 to 60 to 80. Keep in mind, this is an ability you want to frequently use. It's your main boxing ability on Rama outside of your arrows, which, you know, don't exactly have a cooldown the same way. 100 mana. You would so often max this ability first before your arrows and use a quarter of your mana to use it once. So good change. Probably tune it down a little more in my opinion. Vamana getting big nerfs. Probably a good call because he's insane right now. Decreased base movement speed from 380 to 375. I don't know why it was 380. He was a fast little baby. They made it 375, which is more standard for warriors and assassins in general. Decreased base damage on Armored Umbrella from 85 to 305 to 85 to 285. So early game, still going to be just as good. Late game, going to do 20 less damage. Not really late game. Normally you max this ability. Sometimes you max it first. I guess not always, but more mid game, you'll do 20 less damage. I think that's a decent change. It hits pretty damn hard for just, that's his 2. It's just a simple cone, pretty much instant, really easy to hit, does a lot of damage. So probably a good change there. And on Umbrella Ring, decrease the attack speed and movement speed slow from 30% to 25%. Probably a good change as well. I don't think the attack speed slow is too bad, but the movement speed slow pretty strong, especially for an ability that can hit twice. So making it 5% less will actually have a decent impact. But that does it for the patch, you guys. Hopefully you did enjoy the video. Hopefully you got what you needed out of it. Again, if you do care about the assault stuff, if you do care about the skin stuff, I'll have a link to the patch notes for yourself and a link to the VOD as well if you guys want to check that out. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I will see you all in the next one.